What is up, Packers fans? Welcome into an all-new edition of Packaday Live, featuring the one and only Mike Wahle. You can find him on social media at Mike Wahle68. Process to Perform, and of course, right here on the Packaday podcast channel as well. Mike, Happy New Year. How are you doing, my friend?
Hey, Happy New Year, bud. Yeah, I'm doing well. Good weekend. Like we were just saying, I got about 8 people out of the house as of this morning, so I'm just going to decompress after the show here, I think, a little bit, maybe take a nap.
I just realized I broke Larry David's rule of, what is it, the 3 or 4 days after the new year, you can say Happy New Year still. So my apologies for that. I didn't realize I broke the deadline there. So, but we haven't seen each other. So Happy New Year still, but I won't make the mistake again. But yeah, I think everyone's decompressing a little bit, obviously, from a Packers standpoint. 4 consecutive losses. Not sure how much we want to, count this last one into the mix of everything, since it was certainly an interesting, I'll just say, exhibition, to say the least. But let's just start there. What were your thoughts on whatever that was that we saw yesterday?
Well, I would say this broadly for the league that is insisting to go to 18 games for only, what would you say, honestly, 50% of the games didn't matter at all yesterday? They were like, it was like watching preseason.
Yeah.
It's hard. It just makes the product worse, and it's not fun to watch. I know that strategically there's, different coaches have different things they're trying to accomplish, or potentially front office people want to see certain people play, blah, blah, blah. But I think the interesting part to me is I can definitely get down with the idea that the bye week, or simulating a bye week because you can't go anywhere and you're the 7th seed for some of your top players, makes sense. But you kind of fall back into this thing, Andy, where, at least for me, you go like, all right, how many players on your offense and defensive line, for example, are playing so well that they couldn't use the work? And I think that's where you kind of, it was good to see. I think a couple of these kids showed out and played pretty well yesterday. Sorrell played well yesterday. Brandon Cox Jr., he just kind of reminds you that he doesn't care about the run game. He's just always going for the sack. So you've got some guys that you go, okay, I'm glad we saw him. Jacob Monk, it was nice to see him finally in a regular season game. So it was fun to see those guys. I guess, let me rephrase that. If I'm forced to watch a football game, then I guess it was nice to see those guys. But as far as a product on the field, or whether or not that's helping you win next week in Chicago, that's always a tough one to debate.
So many questions I want to ask here. First of all, in your career, did you have a week 16 game in your career where I guess week 17 game it would have been in your final game, or that it would have been like something similar where you're just going out knowing there's either A, nothing to play for, or B, that you've got playoffs in a couple weeks and you're just basically, simming this game out, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, I was never in a situation. Well, listen, when you're playing with Brett Favre, he's not missing a game.
Yeah.
So if he's not missing a game, I'm not missing a game.
True.
And I know that there was a handful of games where maybe in the second half or the fourth quarter, you maybe take the foot off the gas a little bit towards the end of the season. You're trying to rest up. But shoot, man, I remember the last game of the season, I busted my hand. I was playing with a cast and some tape and an aspirin, and I had to play the whole game because it's just kind of like, old head, blah, blah, blah. It's just how we used to play, though. You didn't really think about it. You just kept playing.
I'm assuming you would be on the side of, we got Ben Johnson's comments yesterday. Somebody brought that up. Sherry says, what's Ben Johnson's deal with Matt Lafleur? I saw his comments throwing shade at us for starters. So I don't know if you saw it, but Ben Johnson in his press conference said, some teams rest their players. We play our players, something to that extent. Obviously they had something to play for in that game. They could have got the number 2 seed, or they did get the number 2 seed. They lost the game, but they still got it. Yeah. They could have gone down to the number 3. Green Bay had nothing seeding wise to play for. But did you agree, disagree, or indifferent to the Packers' decision to maybe not play players yesterday?
I think if players are healthy, players should play. All right, that's really what I think. Because I don't think it benefits you to take. I don't think it benefits. How do I say this the right way? Like if Justin Jefferson's in the game, or if Keyshawn Nixon's in the game yesterday, right? Keyshawn Nixon has to play a little bit of ball yesterday, but they need any of his front 7 playing. That affects Keyshawn Nixon's day. There's it's not just one guy out there doing his thing. If you play, if you were to play, hypothetically, you were playing either your 2 better quarterbacks, and you've got a trash offensive line in front of you that's never, most of them have never seen reps. That hurts you. That hurts you as if you're trying to perform as a running back. That hurts you. So I think it's hard. if you know you have a game the next week, or I guess if you know if the season's over and you've got nothing to play for and you've got guys that are injured, I think they should sit out absolutely. But guys that are healthy, I'm much more along the lines of a Ben Johnson's attitude of like, players are there. We're here to play football. I mean, the thing that we don't really talk about, Andy, that it kind of pisses me off when we talk about, like, you think about this with like load management with the NBA and everything, like a lot of players actually do take a lot of pride that a fan has to spend $400 for a ticket. You know, like a lot of players, and I'm one of those guys where I take a lot of pride that people are coming to watch us perform at a high level. And it matters to me. And I think it matters to a lot of guys that those people are spending their money to come watch and support you. And so for you not to show up because, you know, for maybe reasons that are less than genuine, I just don't agree with it. It doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means I don't agree with it.
I totally get that aspect of it. I know for me, one of the first, because I have season tickets for the Packers. I didn't not using many of them because I've got the press pass or whatever, but
that's a flex.
I know it is total flex. What I do end up like the first, even before that, I would always try to basically get rid of the final game first, because yes, there's the possibility that it could be a really important game and you could want to go to that, but more often than not, it ends up being a glorified exhibition game. And we see exactly this, where either one team or the other team isn't playing their top guys, and sometimes both. And you just don't end up with a really good brand of football. And I can't imagine many people that showed up to Minnesota, whether they were Packers fans or Vikings fans, were super thrilled with the overall experience that they got from that game yesterday.
Yeah, agree with that. But it happens all across the league. It does, you know, it's a longer conversation, but it does make you question if they're holding guys out strictly for health reasons, or for just like, we don't need to beat up the body that more, then why would you have 18 games? I mean, because that's where the next step of this thing's going, right? So at some point, if we're acknowledging as a league that we're trying to rest players because they're playing too much, then adding another game wouldn't make a lot of sense. But I guess that's, you know, neither here nor there.
I think it's all strategic. Either, you know, if you're the Raiders, you're shutting down Max Crosby because you want a better chance of getting the number 1 overall pick, or if you're the Green Bay Packers, you're
that's the floor. Don't you think that's? I mean, what do you think about that? That's like, to me, that is the lowest level of sportsmanship that you could possibly have. I mean, this is not the NBA. We don't have 82 games. You know, Max Crosby, I can't think of Brock Bowers, I can't think of another reason why I'm going to go to their game.
Yep.
If Mike Wahle if I am going to their game, it's really only to watch Max Crosby. I mean, that's the only reason I would ever go to one, because I think he's special.
Yep.
So for him not, and then for him to, you know, for Raiders brass to take that away and to hope to tank. I mean, I know they're going to fire Pete. Is, you know, if the Browns guy got fired, which he did, you kind of figured they were going to fire Pete.
And Pete did get fired already.
Yeah. Pete doesn't seem like the kind of guy that's going to just bench Max Crosby, does he? That just doesn't come off like, it doesn't seem like his brand of football.
No, I mean, we are in the world now where we are, you know, just gaming everything. It's all game theory of what gives you the best odds and things like that. And I mean, the game theory is going to say, hey, lose and get the number 1 pick is better than, you know, winning one more game and getting the number 5 pick or whatever, which I think in the NBA is different, because it's even different now in the NBA, where we're seeing more better or even really good players get taken a little bit later. But we were so long in the NBA where if you didn't have a top 3-5 lottery pick or whatever, I mean, your pick was almost meaningless at times. In the NFL, it definitely does not have that same connotation right now. We see teams miss on these number 1, 2, 3 overall picks all the time. And we see Brock Purdy's go last in the draft. Obviously, Tom Brady. We can go on and on. Jordan Love, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen wasn't taken first overall. We can go on and on. I do wonder, the more games we get, the 18 game thing is going to have more and more consequences, where more of these games later in the season have nothing to play for, where teams are shutting down players earlier. We're already seeing players get hurt at an extremely high level because of, you know, whatever. And then, I just think there's going to be consequences to all of this if it continues to go in that direction.
Totally agree. The NBA is obviously different because one person can have such a massive impact on any particular game. But your point is, you know, completely valid. I do think it's interesting. I don't look at it as, I mean, I guess like Cam Ward's the number one pick this year, right? And maybe he turns into the best quarterback in the history of quarterbacks or whatever. And I think he's a really good player and he's kind of a compelling story. But if you're Cam Ward or if you're a fan of Cam Ward's and you get drafted by the Tennessee Titans, who have a history of not being able to develop quarterbacks, a la Malik Willis, like I don't, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't. Yep. It's one of those things where like the Raiders tank or whoever tanks to get this pick, but it really doesn't benefit anybody because it's almost like you're wasting a talented player on a place that doesn't know how to take care of talented players. Like there's not a lot of, you just don't see that many. Like I remember when Peyton Manning got drafted and he was terrible. So Troy Aikman got drafted and he was like 1-14 or 1-15 his first year. He had like 15 picks, some ridiculous thing. Peyton Manning had like 30 picks, some ridiculous number. But they turned their career, they kind of turned it around, and it was in the context of turning around the entire football club. I'm sure if we sat here and thought about it, we could figure out a couple of clubs that look that way, but it just doesn't feel that way anymore with some of these bottom feeders.
I'm with you. I think there's so many issues here that we could go over of just you're rewarding the bad teams and you're putting really good players from college in some of the worst systems by doing that over and over. We could go through a full draft revamp episode that I would have a ton of fun with, but not sure how far we want to dig into that today. But we've obviously got a lot to get into. You mentioned a couple of those players that were kind of fun to keep an eye on in this game. I know Landon here brought up Colin Oliver as a player. I know somebody tweeted at me prior to it, actually tweeted at both of us asking about Jacob Monk, a player that you brought up. Baron Sorrell, who, if anybody, kind of stood out to you in this game of, hey, maybe there's something there that maybe we haven't seen as of yet.
I think those three are probably off the top of my head the easiest ones to point to. Let's start with Jacob Monk. So there's a size issue in pass pro because a guy can get to, he's quite small, and so getting to the edge and you're not being overextended and everything is something you have to work on. I thought he was elite as a mover in the run game, as a change of direction guy, as a leverage guy. I thought he did really well. He gets back in pass pro. He did a lot of things that make you feel good. I'm not saying he's better than like Sean Ryan or anything. I'm just saying they're totally different players, different kind of mover, but he is an elite level mover from that position. So that was fun to watch. I thought what's interesting right now is I was just watching the Lions Bears game, and Aiden Hutchinson has a sack on 58, and you're going like, oh, I missed that, where we could just like get a sack, and then you go, yeah, I know it sounds terrible to say, but it's true, right? Like you just miss those days when Micah Parsons could just go out and rip a couple sacks out. But I thought you saw from Sorrell that there's something there where you're like, oh, okay, he understands the assignment. You know what I mean? He understands, let's not overthink this. Let's get to the hip. Let's rip up, get tall, get skinny. I thought he did that. I thought Colin Oliver did that. I think he's got a little more. I think he's probably got a little bit further way to go. Although he had some nice sets on the right tackle. But those guys are fun to watch as projected players for the next season. There's nothing that from anybody that I saw yesterday, and I think this is kind of a no-brainer statement, but that is going to vault them into reps in the playoffs, if that makes sense.
I'm with you. I don't think. I mean, you take a look at Sorrell and Colin Oliver, right?
Yeah.
I don't see. We can make the conversation about Rashawn Gary and LVN and what their place is. They're not benching Rashawn Gary. They're not benching LVN. They're not benching Kingsley Nigbare. Aaron Mosby's going to play on special teams, so he's going to be an active defensive end. So you have probably one extra spot. So you get to choose between Bretton Cox, Baron Sorrell, and Colin Oliver. I'm with you. I don't think it's going to be Oliver just because he seems a little bit further away, even though I like some of the stuff I saw yesterday. So it really just comes down to who do you want as your fourth snapped defensive end in this game for about 10 to 12 snaps? Do you want Bretton Cox or Baron Sorrell? That's probably the conversation there. Jacob Monk's not vaulting into the starting lineup. The only one that's semi-interesting to me is Trayvon Diggs, who I'd love your thoughts on as well. That would be the only one where I think has the opportunity to maybe vault into the starting lineup.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's a proven, excellent football player in this league. He was always kind of an interesting guy, right? Because he kind of had those 2 years where I think he led the league in picks and also yards after catch or touchdowns given up or something. I don't know where everybody fits in this secondary right now. I don't know where do you put a Trayvon Diggs?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I'm asking you. I guess I'm asking. Keyshawn Nixon's not coming off the field. Carrington Valentine has had. I think Carrington Valentine has just had this really odd season where I thought he was fantastic early. They just gave away his position to Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs didn't show up. He came back, and immediately his physical presence was felt. And it just it just happened to be that what he offered was exactly what they needed for the teams they were playing at the time. And so it just kind of felt like every time he got inserted, it was like, oh, you're doing exactly what is required. I think both those guys have been exposed a little bit because of lack of pass rush over the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
He certainly had, as everybody did, had a rough game against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, when you've got, random 250 plus pound dudes running at you, it kind of, I'm sure that sucks from a cornerback's perspective, but I just don't see, I don't know that Diggs is just walking off the street and coming in and playing a lot. And Javon Bullard just got hurt. I don't know what the status is with him. If he's going
sounds like he's going to be okay. Sounds like he's going to be okay.
Although, then you could say maybe the slot, but I just honestly, Andy, I don't know. I mean, it's good to have depth, but I don't know if he's a rotational guy, and if so, are you trying to prove a point, or do we think he's that good?
Yeah, the first thing I would say is it did feel to me like there were two different occasions where they tried to bench Carrington Valentine against the Ravens, and maybe that's just game specific. But Kamal Haddon comes in for him. Nate Hobbs comes in for him. Both of them go down hurt. So Valentine has to continue playing. I also don't think that you pick up a $500,000. It's in NFL money. It's kind of couch cushion money, but a $500,000 contract for one game if you don't plan on playing Trayvon Diggs. So my thought and my guess is we're going to see Keyshawn on one side. We're going to see Bullard in the slot, assuming he's healthy. We'll see X and Evan at safety, and either a platoon of Diggs, because he maybe doesn't know the full playbook yet. Maybe it's certain plays, certain packages, certain situations that he's in, and he and Carrington kind of go back and forth. We've seen them do that on the offensive line. We've seen them do it at safety with Evan and Bullard before. It wouldn't stun me if they did something like that. Or it's just Trayvon Diggs, and he just gets to start and plays there, and Valentine ends up on the bench. It's I guess I should say it's possible too that it's just Valentine and Diggs is first guy up if anyone gets hurt. The only other thing I could see is there have been times in obvious passing downs where they've wanted to get Javon Bullard out of the slot because he's just not quite the coverage guy. And they put Nate Hobbs in that situation. So maybe then, and I wonder if they would even consider, do you put Nixon back in the slot on obvious passing downs and let Diggs and Valentine go outside in those situations? My guess is there's going to be something. I don't think it's going to be, we get to this game and Trayvon Diggs doesn't play in the defensive backfield. To me, it's just, is there package? Is there a platoon? Is he just the starter? I think there'll be something for him.
Yeah, it always is. I mean, it's always interesting to see how they would platoon a guy if they're platooning him by defensive, by coverage. Obviously, you can only do that for a quarter or two before the other team figures it out.
Correct.
It's interesting watching the Baltimore game, and then just kind of, it just. I watched the game knowing that he got, they were trying to bench him, multiple. It felt like multiple times to me too, and watching and going okay, what's he doing different? How many are we making mental mistakes? Is there physical errors here? What is he doing so poorly compared to everybody else? And I really couldn't put my finger on something that would cause you to want to bench him not once but twice in the game. And then I'll go and I'll say that by saying this: if that actually was the case, then he would never see the field again for me if I was the defensive coordinator. You know what I mean? So that's where it's. I think you have you're onto something. If they did try to bench him twice and it wasn't because of injury or something else is going on in one game, then I don't want you to play for me anymore.
Yeah,
because or at least for a while, because you've proven you're not willing to do what it takes. So. And maybe that's why maybe that's behind this, and they're never going to come out and say it because they don't want to ruin the guy's confidence or career. But it would be very surprising if you tried to bench a guy twice in a game and he still didn't perform the way you wanted to at the end of the game. The signature play of the game being him getting blocked by the 295-pound fullback on the way to the 30-yard touchdown run at the end. And then, having a guy like that come back and okay, we're going to start you for the playoffs. That really doesn't make sense either. So you might be onto something there.
They did rest him though for the majority of yesterday's game. So
Yeah.
you would think if they were planning, and they could have used the depth. If they play him more, they don't have to play Bullard or Evan Williams in that game because they have enough pieces then to go nickel. So yeah, it's an interesting scenario, and I'm curious to see what they're ultimately going to do. Mike and I are going to be on the podcast tomorrow as a FYI. So we're going to talk a lot of Packers Bears for tomorrow. We'll kind of focus more on Vikings and some of the questions over the next 15 minutes or so. And then for tomorrow, we're going to talk again, a ton of Packers Bears, but let's have our weekly conversation. Apparently, Richard says, I've seen a lot of fans say that Matt Lafleur should be fired if they lose to Chicago this Saturday, depending on how the game goes. Do you agree or disagree? We've got Smooterino who says, I'm not fully on the fire Matt Lafleur bandwagon, but Stefanski being available after being thrown under the bus in the Browns is certainly intriguing. Marina says, if we lose to the Bears, does Matt Lafleur go? I think there's a scenario where that happens. Mike, where I know we've had this conversation seemingly every week. Is there anything about this game with Chicago that would change your opinion one way or the other of what Green Bay should do with Matt Lafleur? And is, in your opinion, he coaching for his job, or is there a scenario where he would not be the coach next year?
So Ben Johnson comes in his first year and beats you 2 out of 3, including a playoff at home. And there's a little bit of a changing of a guard there then, right? Because you have Detroit, you assume is going to be better next year. They're not going to get, there's hit some injury bugs and this and that. And then you have Chicago winning the division, and now you're the third place team. You can start. I'm projecting here, but you're like, okay, well, I'm in the mix, but I'm not top dog as I used to be. I think the biggest thing I think there's always something there. I think the fact that he wasn't given a contract extension is very telling. Those things that's not an insignificant, move or non-move, I guess. The one thing that got me from this conversation last week that stuck with me when you brought up that this is his 7th year, and I truly, in my 30 plus years of kind of being around NFL football, I truly have always thought that the line of demarcation for a good coach is about 7 years.
Yeah.
Now there's the Steelers organization in totality. There's Bill Belichick. There's guys that have lasted longer than that. Most of those guys have won Super Bowls, and most of those guys are not of this mold, which is a little bit more old school football coach. Whether it's the way they practice, whether it's the way they just present themselves, et cetera, right? So this is a new generation. Maybe they can hang on for a little bit longer. Maybe the message is still being received. I don't know. But I do think it's interesting that this is year 7. They seem to be going – we can make the argument, although it was a close race, we can make the argument that they're trending down. I think one of the stats that you showed me last week about their success against playoff teams over the course of the last 2 seasons means that you're trending down. Yeah, so you're going the wrong direction. I think, Andy, the hard part is, and everybody talks about Kevin Stefanski in particular, and I can see we can make an argument about why that's a good or bad thing. But if Matt LaFleur gets fired, I don't think he's for every team. But I do think he's probably sought after. Like, he's going to get a job.
Big time. Yeah, right away. Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
So I think that's the hard part. And I'm always interested on what, the Mike McDaniel hire in Dolphins, or the fact that they're not firing him or whatever that is. But that mix, that personality, that profile, everybody thought he was, he's quirky. He's got a little, different look to him. He's got a little different way he carries about the media. Like, everybody liked him. And now a lot of people are kind of, okay, the shtick's kind of old. This is a little bit played out, blah, 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 blah. My point being that there's different personalities, maybe fit different ownership styles, different buildings, et cetera. So it would be interesting to see where Matt LaFleur would fit in to what one of these open job, or what city, what media fan base, et cetera. But I do think that he would be pretty highly sought after he got fired. And then the Packers are going like, I think there's a lot of assistant head coaches that deserve an opportunity that you could be really, really happy with. I think we have one in-house. But gosh, man, yeah, I'm just a long-winded way. That's a long-winded way of me saying I'm not sure. But I do think that the 7 years and the record for the last 2 seasons against playoff teams, I think is very interesting.
I think he and this organization, Goody, Jordan Love, all of them could really use a playoff win this week.
Yeah.
I think that would help, ease some fears. Going one and done again, I think would be, concerning to some extent. It's a really interesting timeline for Matt, because if you think 2018 was a bad year. They fire Mike McCarthy. Nothing goes right. 2019, Matt comes in and they immediately win 13 games. They go 13-3. They go to the NFC Championship game. They were well ahead of schedule. They clearly weren't ready for San Fran at that point yet, but well ahead of schedule. And it's a really phenomenal year for Green Bay. 2020, they come back. If I remember correctly, they go 13-3 again. They win their divisional round game. And then you got the Bakhtiari injury prior to the playoffs, and a couple things go wrong. You've got the Kevin King play before halftime. Jones fumbles in the second half. You end up losing to Tampa. I still think a wildly successful season, but you fall short in the NFC Championship game.
Those are both Aaron Rodgers years?
Yes, correct. Yep. 2021, you come back, and again, another Aaron Rodgers year. It's the last dance, so to speak, and you have another really successful regular season, but you get to the divisional round, immediately lose to San Francisco in the blocked punt game in that game. But like, they had a phenomenal season up until that point. We're right up there with the Super Bowl contenders, at least expected to be, but you fall short in the playoffs. 2022, you try to bring the whole team back together. It's a season from hell. You end up in the final game where you lose to Detroit. You fall short. They rally at the end. Again, don't get in the playoffs. Unsuccessful season, but that had some weird moments. It felt like the Aaron situation had reached a point where it wasn't going to work anymore. He needed to go in a different direction. Packers needed to go in a different direction. 2023, first year with Jordan Love, new quarterback, youngest team in the league, and you immediately put together a playoff performance. You win in Dallas. You compete extremely well against San Francisco. You once again feel like you're well ahead of schedule of where you're expected to be in Jordan's first year. You get to 2024, you're what, 13-4 or 13-4, 12-5, somewhere in that range. Maybe it wasn't quite as good, but either way, they have a very successful season again. It wasn't that good. It was like, what, 5 or 6 losses? Either way.
Yeah, because they were 7th seed, right?
Yeah, you're right. Because they lost twice to Detroit, twice to Minnesota, once to Chicago, once to Philly. So I think they had 6 losses in the regular season. And then you get, you end on a losing streak. You get eliminated right away by Philly in the playoffs. So a disappointing end, another solid season. Then you get to this year, you get to Denver. You're trending in the right direction. You would have won, 4 games in a row? And you're ready to, beat Denver in Denver, maybe a signature win on the season. And then all of a sudden you get all the injuries. Tucker Kraft was already out. Tom goes out in that game. Micah Parsons goes out. Watson goes out for a bit. Jordan Love misses a couple games. You don't play the last game regularly. You end up at a 4-game losing streak. And now TBD what happens in the playoffs. But it's like this really interesting dynamic of a lot of really impressive records, seasons, things like that. But maybe not. Maybe you disagree.
I think that when Matt, look, I don't know. I'm not in the locker room. I'm just giving you my player perspective from outside the locker room.
Absolutely.
But yeah, okay. So I don't think that he was the leader of the room when Aaron Rodgers was there. Players make plays on the field. I think that was, and I think he's an extremely good, we've talked about it, play caller, et cetera, but like the culture of the building was already set when he got there. I thought he became a head coach when Jordan Love became his quarterback. And not to take away, not that he didn't do anything. I'm not trying to dismiss the work that he put in. I just think that's the reality of having the best quarterback of the generation happen to be, in his 16th year or whatever when you walk in the building. I think it's just a different
fair point.
Yeah, I think that's just a different thing. So if you look at it from that perspective, he's had 3 7 seeds, 2 or 3 7 seeds, right? Since
3 7 seeds,
yeah, since Jordan's been there. So in my generation, that's not a playoff team. And I know it's different now, and it doesn't. So that doesn't even really matter. I would look at if it was me doing the tough decision making. I think it's very valid that you lose your most desirable players on offense and defense this year, Micah Parsons and Tucker Kraft. But how the product you're putting on the field, again, just from is this what we're paying to see? Is this the level of physicality, the level of detail, the level of discipline and determination. Like, are those all the things that you love? Because I think that's what the head coach brings to the table, particularly with a very young roster. And so I think everybody, that Goody or whoever's in charge is going to have to make that decision. But I would look at it maybe from that lens, maybe the last couple seasons, more so than the first 3 or 4 when he did have generational Aaron Rodgers.
I think it's fair. I think it's a fair assessment. And I think that's what's going to make this the entire discussion. And maybe they've already made the decision one way or the other or whatever. But I mean, I think it makes it a fascinating discussion just because I don't think there's a clear cut. I don't think there's a very clear cut like, oh, there's a Ben Johnson out there waiting for you if you fire Matt LaFleur. So yeah, I think that adds to it as well. The fact that he's in a contract year adds to the conversation a ton also. I think it's an interesting dynamic, an interesting conversation, and I'll be interested what happens depending on how the game against Chicago goes. I do think a win against Chicago almost for sure buys him another year at least to kind of figure things out, but it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's like Andy, it's like if Micah Parsons doesn't get hurt, we're not having this conversation. So therefore there's half the people on the planet are going to go like, well, there's your answer. But then the other half, like the me's of the world are going to go, well, how you respond to adversity is what matters. Right. So it's really hard now. Like I think Cam Newton was talking this morning on First Take. He's like, it's the Jimmies and Joes, not the X's and O's. Like the players that ultimately are responsible for the performance they put on the field. And Matt LaFleur has to answer to, I think, particularly when you have a young team, that shifts more towards the influence a coach can have. And so having this young team, I think, is a blessing and a curse for him in some regards, right? Where you can probably point to some of the things from just like a presentation standpoint on the field, from physicality of play, level of discipline and detail, that are probably more imprinted by a coaching staff than it would be if there was a team full of veterans.
That's fair. And yeah, I do think if you were to make the cases against Matt LaFleur, I think the playoff team one, which we talked about, 3-10 in the last 2 years against playoff team, was about to be 2-11 if Baltimore would have beat Pittsburgh last night, but it's 3-10 because they beat Pittsburgh, lost to Baltimore. So 3-10 against playoff teams in the last 2 years. And then I guess what I would ask too is over the last 3 years, and again, I'm fully on board with keeping Matt. I'll just put that out there. But over the last 3-ish years, where is Green Bay like gotten consistently better? Like where's their improvement been? I haven't really seen it on special teams. Defense with Jeff Hafley, I think at times, not at times, has definitely looked better. But I think that's more Jeff Hafley and what he's done over Joe Barry and some others.
Yep.
I don't know organizationally with where this team is at, where they've gotten a lot better over the last few years. But
so injuries, well, so they got rid of their strength and conditioning staff. I think he brought in like his buddy he brought in somebody else. I don't know who it was.
From San Fran, I think it was. Yeah.
So he brought in his other guy. Have they gotten better from that standpoint? Have they gotten, are they doing a better job there? Do they feel like they're a more physical football team? What's the injury rate, et cetera? Doesn't feel like the injury rate's any better, although I don't think that's kind of it's probably a silly argument by me, but you've made some changes. You've brought people in, right? Has your offensive team gotten better over the last couple of years? Well, we saw growth in the wide receiver room, and then it felt like it stopped last year. This year's been kind of fits and starts because of injuries. Tucker Kraft has certainly emerged as a top guy. How much of that is like tight end university? How much that is him? How much of that is the coaching staff? The offensive line has not. Everybody's talking about the glory days with Sitton and Bakhtiari and TJ and Corey Linsley and all those guys still. So that really hasn't gone in the right direction. And then maybe the most important position, Jordan. I think Jordan's a really good player who is. I think it's fair to say that he's maturing or evolving kind of at a pace that you would expect in the National Football League. I don't know that he is over the last from 3 years ago to 2 years ago to this year. And I don't know the statistics, but just to the eye, he's certainly gotten better. Has he taken this like massive leap where you're like, oh, he's top 3? not that maybe he's not a guy that's ever going to be top 3, but if he hasn't, then he's more along the lines of like, okay, got mentored by the greatest player in his generation, had been well coached and it is in a fantastic system. He continues to improve. He does a lot of work on his own, et cetera, et cetera. But where has that like massive, okay, you're the guy in the league right now. You're the guy in the NFC North right now.
Hopefully that jump is to come starting this week against Chicago, and we can put all of this to rest. And Jordan looks amazing, and they win some playoff games, and we don't have to talk about these. We can talk about how exciting this team is with their quarterback coaching, et cetera, moving forward. But that's why I do think this is a big game for Green Bay for a variety of different reasons. Jonathan just brings up a good point too, of just if you bring in a new coach, Matt's done a good job with Jordan, obviously even with Malik when given a chance. You're going to have to make sure you find the right offensive mind, play caller, et cetera, that fits Jordan really well. So that's another aspect of this that would have to be kind of figured out also. And then Alex just asked to, what did you think? Basically, I'm paraphrasing here for Alex or putting words in his mouth, but what did you think of Jordan Morgan at left tackle in this game with our first real kind of look at him at left tackle?
He looked like same guy. He gets off the ball pretty decently in pass pro, really bad footwork on the backside, got beat on the backside a ton. And not very, very fixable, but just plays a little bit high, not very physical, kind of steps under himself on the backside, cut off stuff. It's tough to judge from a game like this. Honestly, it's just pretty poor. It looked like a preseason game, but the thing about Jordan Morgan is he does move. He's a very, very good mover. And it always comes down to like the little details. If you watch really, really good football players who aren't the elite level athletes, like the non-Trent Williams of the world, most of them win on their first step. And if you don't win on your first step, to like my eye, you just don't look very good. Right. Yeah. So he's just got some work to do, but it's, I just hope that next year he is just like an all-pro. You know what I mean? Because it's like this conversation or like all these opportunities, we've had these conversations about him specifically, like way more than I think was deserved by anything that happened on the field.
That's fair. And maybe he can find a way to work with Mike Wahle in the offseason, improve some of that footwork and technique a little bit.
That would be interesting. Nobody could know though.
Unless he does awesome next year, then you release it that, oh yeah, he was actually
no, even then it makes it. Andy, here's the thing, like it's a different story, but yeah, that sometimes makes it worse.
Fair enough. Either way would probably be a good idea for him. I would highly recommend it if Jordan's listening. Work with Mike in the off season. Mike, we will obviously talk Packers Bears for tomorrow's pod. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Nope. Just glad I'm glad the regular season's over. I think the playoffs are the most exciting time to be alive in the NFL world. So let's get chatting.
These matchups are freaking great. I can't wait. By the way, make sure to check out Sleeper. You can get 100% match up to $100 by utilizing code Packaday. Playoffs are going to be super fun, so get those picks in with Sleeper. You can find them, again, over on Sleeper, and they're available in 25 states nationwide. So see terms and conditions on Sleeper for details, but make sure to get those Sleeper picks in, and again, utilize code Packaday. That's going to do it for Mike and I right now. Find him at Mike Wahle 68. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL. We will see you for tomorrow's pod, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.